The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of past, present, and future. But what happens when something from beyond the stars, beyond reality itself, tears through that web? When a door that should never open is breached by a sorcerer who doesn't understand the consequences? Dr. Stephen Strange had faced impossible odds before. He'd bargained with cosmic entities, manipulated time itself, and held reality together with sheer will. But as he navigated the kaleidoscopic pathways between dimensions, searching for a threat that existed outside conventional space, he made a fatal miscalculation. The pathway he opened wasn't just another dimension. It was older than universes. It existed between heartbeats of existence itself. The world between worlds. Strange felt it the moment his spell connected, a presence so vast, so intricate, that every cell in his body screamed in recognition. This wasn't empty space between realities. This was alive, conscious, infinite. The mystic arts recoiled. His carefully woven portal shattered like glass, and Stephen Strange was pulled through into a realm of endless doorways suspended in a void of ethereal blue light. Pathways stretched in every direction, each one a window into moments, some past, some yet to come, all existing simultaneously. "No," Strange breathed, his levitation spell barely keeping him stable as the dimensional pressure threatened to crush his consciousness. "This can't be!" A doorway to his left showed a man in black armor, breathing mechanically, standing before an emperor wreathed in lightning. Another showed a young woman with a staff, standing alone on a desert world. A third revealed twin suns setting over endless sand. These weren't dimensions. These were moments. Specific points in a timeline he didn't recognize, held in perfect preservation by something far older than the Vishanti, older than the dark dimension. Strange reached out with his senses, trying to understand the architecture of this place. His astral form partially separated from his body, seeking answers, and recoiled immediately. The energy here wasn't dimensional. It was biological, spiritual. It connected to everything in this strange new reality. "The Force," he whispered, understanding flooding through him. He'd breached a universe where magic wasn't mystical energy drawn from other dimensions. It was a living field generated by life itself, and he'd just torn a hole in it. The world between worlds convulsed. Doorways flickered and multiplied. Strange saw the same desert planet in a dozen states, barren, then populated, then burning, then rebuilt. Time was unraveling. He tried to seal the breach, but his spell fizzled. The energy here resisted him, fighting his attempts to manipulate it. Strange felt his reserves draining faster than they should. Every spell cost twice the energy it should have. A doorway directly ahead pulsed with light. Through it, Strange saw an island surrounded by endless ocean, ancient stone structures, and a presence in the Force so strong it pulled at him like gravity. He had seconds to choose. Stay in the world between worlds and be torn apart by temporal paradox, or escape into this unknown galaxy and hope he could fix what he'd broken. Dr. Strange made his choice. He dove through the doorway. Reality twisted around him, the Force screaming as foreign mystical energy contaminated its perfect balance. Strange felt himself falling through layers of existence, his cloak of levitation struggling to slow his descent. Then he crashed into solid ground on an island that smelled of salt and ancient stone, surrounded by startled bird-like creatures that scattered at his arrival. Above him, storm clouds gathered unnaturally fast, as if the sky itself was responding to his presence. The Force had felt him arrive. And across the galaxy, those sensitive to its call would feel reality itself crack. Rey felt it like a lightning strike directly into her mind. She was meditating on the highest peak of Ahch-To, the sacred Jedi texts spread before her, trying to decipher Luke Skywalker's cryptic annotations about doors that should never open. and places between places. The ancient books spoke of legends, of a realm where time had no meaning, where all moments existed at once. Then the Force screamed. Rey's eyes snapped open, her breath catching as the disturbance rippled through her consciousness. It wasn't like sensing danger or feeling someone's presence. This was wrong on a fundamental level, as if someone had reached into the fabric of existence and torn it. The sacred texts began to glow. Symbols she'd never seen active suddenly pulsed with pale blue light, and the pages turned themselves to a passage written in Old Corellian. "Beware the traveler from beyond the veil. He who walks between worlds but knows not the Force will break what cannot be broken." "No," Rey whispered. "Not now. We're barely holding the resistance together." A pulse of mystical energy erupted from somewhere below, near the ancient Jedi temple. The Force bent around it like water around a stone, trying to accommodate something fundamentally incompatible with its nature. Rey was already running. Her staff was in her hand, lightsaber clipped to her belt. The caretakers, the native lanai of Ahch-To, were emerging from their stone village, pointing toward the temple with alarm in their flat faces. They'd felt it too. She arrived at the meditation circle where Luke Skywalker had spent his final years. The ancient stone was cracked, radiating from a central point where impossible geometries hung in the air, fractal patterns that hurt to look at, angles that existed in more dimensions than 3. And in the center of it all, struggling to stand, was a man in blue robes with a red cloak that moved independently of the wind. His hands wove intricate patterns, golden circles of energy forming and dispersing as he tried to contain the anomaly. But Rey could feel the Force rejecting his efforts, treating his power like a foreign substance. "Stop!" Rey shouted, igniting her lightsaber. The yellow blade hummed to life. "You're making it worse!" The stranger's head snapped toward her. His eyes were sharp, analytical, a surgeon's eyes, and he assessed her in a fraction of a second. Weapon, stance, Force sensitivity radiating from her like sunlight. "I'm trying to seal the breach," he said tersely, his accent completely foreign to her ears. "If I don't stabilize this dimensional fracture, your entire reality could collapse into temporal paradox." "Dimensional? What are you talking about?" Rey approached cautiously, feeling the wrongness intensifying. Around the stranger, the Force was behaving erratically, rippling and distorting like heat waves. "Who are you?" "Dr. Stephen Strange." He abandoned the containment spell. It was failing anyway, and faced her directly. "I'm a sorcerer from somewhere else. Another universe entirely. I was tracking a threat through the multiverse when I accidentally breached something I didn't understand. A realm of pure temporal energy, connected to every moment in your history." "The world between worlds," Rey breathed, recognition flooding through her. Luke's texts had mentioned it, a mystical dimension accessible only through the Force, where time had no meaning. "You opened it? From outside? I didn't know what it was!" Strange's frustration was evident. "And now the barrier between it and your reality is fractured. Time is bleeding through. Past and future are beginning to overlap." As if to punctuate his words, a doorway flickered into existence 20 feet away, a portal of blue light showing a different version of Ahch-To, where Luke Skywalker still stood in the meditation circle, training a younger Rey. Rey's breath caught. "Luke." The vision faded, but Strange's expression had gone grim. "It's already started. These fractures will multiply. The dead will walk. Moments that should be fixed will become mutable. Your entire timeline is at risk." Rey deactivated her lightsaber but kept it ready. "Can you fix it?" "I don't know," Strange admitted. And the honesty in his voice was somehow more frightening than false confidence would have been. "I've sealed dimensional breaches before, but never in a universe where the fundamental energy, this Force you use, actively resists my magic. Every spell I cast drains me twice as fast. I'm operating blind." Rey studied him. The Force swirled around him chaotically, but there was no darkness in him, no malice, just desperate urgency and barely controlled fear. Then you'll need help, she decided. Someone who understands the Force. And someone who won't execute me for breaking reality? Strange asked dryly. Rey almost smiled despite the situation. That too. Come on. We need to get you somewhere safer than... The Force lurched again. Both of them staggered as another pulse of temporal energy rippled outward from Strange's arrival point. This time, Rey felt it spread across the entire galaxy, a wave of wrongness that every Force-sensitive being would detect, including Kylo Ren. Across the Outer Rim, a Twi'lek smuggler named Soretti was negotiating a spice deal when her dead mother appeared beside her, translucent and glowing, warning her about a betrayal that had happened 3 years ago. Soretti shot her business partner in panic before the vision faded, leaving her alone with a corpse and questions that would haunt her forever. On Coruscant, a street urchin touched a wall and saw the entire city as it had been during the Clone Wars, pristine, populated, alive with Jedi. The vision lasted 7 seconds. When it ended, he knew things no child should know. Battle strategies, fallen temples, the names of the dead. In the First Order, flagship Steadfast, General Hux was reviewing fleet deployments when his tactical display flickered. For a moment, just a moment, it showed a version of himself older, scarred, standing aboard a resistance vessel with a blaster in hand. Then it was gone, leaving him staring at the screen with something cold settling in his stomach. The temporal fractures were spreading. On Kef Bir, one of Endor's moons, scavengers searching the wreckage of the second Death Star found themselves witnessing its destruction over and over, trapped in a loop of the past. They screamed for help that wouldn't come for hours, watching Palpatine die repeatedly in their minds. And in the unknown regions, in a fortress built from ancient Sith architecture, Kylo Ren felt the disturbance like a dagger between his ribs. He was alone in his meditation chamber when it happened. Helmet off. Reaching through the Force toward the broken kyber crystal that powered his unstable lightsaber. The rage and conflict within him usually made the Force turbulent, chaotic. But this was different. This was fracture. Kylo's eyes snapped open. He stood abruptly, his meditation disrupted. The Force was behaving impossibly, showing him fragments of moments that hadn't happened yet, or had already passed, or were happening simultaneously across different timelines. He saw himself on Exegol, kneeling before Palpatine. He saw himself on the Steadfast, giving orders that would burn entire systems. He saw himself on a ruined Death Star, facing Rey with rain lashing against them both. And he saw something else. Something wrong. A presence in the Force that didn't belong. Foreign, mystical, incompatible with the natural order. It was like sensing a droid where a living being should be, except this was worse. This was reality itself protesting. "Show me!" Kylo commanded the Force, his voice low and dangerous. The visions intensified. He saw Ahch-To, that miserable island where Luke Skywalker had hidden like a coward. And he saw a man in strange robes, surrounded by golden symbols that hurt to perceive through the Force, speaking with Rey. Kylo's hands clenched into fists. Of course Rey would find him first. Of course she'd ally with whatever anomaly had fractured the Force itself. But as Kylo watched, another vision overlaid the first. The same man, the same island, but older. Past or future, Kylo couldn't tell. And standing beside the stranger wasn't Rey. It was Anakin Skywalker, young, whole, alive. "Grandfather," Kylo breathed. The vision shattered. Kylo staggered, his breath coming in harsh gasps. His heart pounded with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Terrible, seductive hope. If time was fracturing, if the barrier between moments was breaking down, then the past wasn't truly gone. The dead weren't truly lost. His grandfather, the real Anakin Skywalker, before he became the broken thing in the mask, could return, could be saved. Kylo activated his comlink with shaking hands. "Hux, prepare my shuttle and summon the Knights of Ren. I'm going to Ahch-To." "Sir?" Hux's voice was crisp despite the underlying confusion. "That system is inhabited by Rey and something that doesn't belong in this galaxy," Kylo interrupted. "Something that's broken the Force itself. I want it captured alive. And Hux?" His voice dropped to something cold and absolute. "If anyone else senses what I've sensed, if the Resistance moves to secure this anomaly, you will burn their fleet from the sky before they can reach him. Understood?" "Understood, Supreme Leader." Kylo ended the transmission and stared at his reflection in the polished durasteel of his chamber. His scarred face looked back, a reminder of his failure, of the choice he'd made to kill Han Solo, of the grandfather he'd failed to live up to. But if this stranger truly had broken time itself, Kylo Ren had been given an opportunity the Sith had dreamed of for millennia: the power to rewrite the past. Dr. Strange sat in the ancient Jedi temple, surrounded by sacred texts that meant nothing to him, and a young woman who radiated power she barely understood how to control. His cloak of levitation hung motionless over his shoulders. Even it seemed subdued in this place where the Force was so concentrated. "Let me understand this correctly," Strange said, his fingers pressed against his temples. "This Force of yours connects all living things across your entire galaxy. It has a light side and a dark side, representing different philosophical approaches to power. And there's an actual mystical realm, this world between worlds that exists as a junction point for all moments in time." "That's simplified, but yes," Rey confirmed. She was sitting across from him, her staff leaning against the stone wall. Outside, the caretakers had resumed their daily routines, but Strange could feel their nervous glances. The world between worlds is sacred, forbidden. Only a handful of beings in history have ever accessed it. And you just opened it from outside reality. Unintentionally, Strange stressed. "If I'd known, but you didn't." Rey's tone wasn't accusatory, just stating fact. "And now we need to fix it before—" She trailed off, her expression troubled. "Before what?" "Before someone uses it." Rey met his eyes. "Strange. If the barrier between worlds is weakening, then the past isn't safe anymore. People could change things, prevent deaths, alter critical moments. The entire timeline could unravel." Strange nodded slowly. In his universe, the Time Stone had carried similar dangers. He'd used it once, bargaining with Dormammu in an infinite time loop, and the Ancient One had warned him about the cost of temporal manipulation. But this was worse. This wasn't isolated time magic. This was a universe-wide phenomenon affecting billions of lives. "I need to understand how the Force works," Strange said. "My magic operates on principles of dimensional energy, drawing power from other realms to reshape reality. But here, every time I cast a spell, I feel resistance, like the Force itself is fighting me." Rey considered this. The Force isn't a tool. It's alive in a way. It has a will, even if we don't fully understand it. What you're doing, this dimensional magic, might feel like a violation to the Force, something unnatural. Then I need to adapt. Strange stood, beginning to pace. His mind was already working through the problem systematically. "If the Force operates on biological and spiritual principles rather than dimensional ones, then I need to learn to harmonize with it, channel it instead of fighting against it." "You want to learn the Force?" Rey's eyebrows rose. "Strange. People train for years. I memorized an entire medical library in 3 years and became one of the most skilled neurosurgeons on my planet." Strange interrupted, not boasting, just stating fact. Then I learned to manipulate reality itself in a fraction of that time. I'm a fast learner when the stakes are high enough, and right now, they couldn't be higher. Rey studied him for a long moment. Strange could feel her reaching out through the Force, reading him, not his thoughts, but his intentions, the core of who he was. It was invasive and uncomfortable, but he allowed it. She needed to trust him. Finally, Rey nodded. All right, but we need to move carefully. If you start channeling the Force without proper understanding, you could make things worse. Luke's texts mention techniques for Force-sensitive beings from other traditions. He believed the Force transcended any one interpretation. Good. Strange pulled one of the texts toward him, studying the strange script. Then we start with the basics. How does one feel the Force? Before Rey could answer, a pulse of warning shot through both of them. Rey's hand went to her lightsaber. Strange's fingers traced protective glyphs instinctively. He felt it, Rey whispered, her face going pale. Kylo, he knows you're here. Kylo Ren? Strange recalled the name from the fragmented visions he'd seen in the world between worlds, a man torn between light and dark, powerful and unstable. The supreme leader of your First Order? And someone who would do anything, sacrifice anything, to bring back his grandfather. Rey was already moving toward the entrance. Darth Vader died decades ago, but Kylo worships his memory. If he realizes the world between worlds is accessible, if he thinks he can reach back through time and save Anakin Skywalker before he fell. Strange understood immediately. He'll use the breach to rewrite history and destroy everything in the process. Rey turned back to him. We need to leave Ahch-To, now. The Resistance needs to know what's happening, and you need protection until we can fix this. Strange nodded, summoning his power. A portal began to form, golden and circular, leading to nowhere. It sputtered and collapsed. He tried again. Same result. What's wrong? Rey asked. My sling ring portals require precise dimensional coordinates, Strange explained grimly. But I don't know the dimensional address of your universe, and the Force is interfering with my ability to calculate new pathways. I can't teleport us out. Rey cursed in a language Strange didn't recognize. Then we fly. There's a ship in the lower bay, Luke's old X-Wing. I've been restoring it. And if Kylo Ren arrives before we can leave? Rey's jaw set with determination. Then you're about to see what a Jedi can do when the stakes are high enough. The Resistance base on Ajan Kloss hummed with controlled chaos. Technicians worked on damaged fighters. Strategists debated their next move against the First Order. And everyone tried to ignore the reality that they were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. General Leia Organa stood in the command center, reviewing reports, when she felt it, the disturbance Rey had sensed, now spreading like ripples across the entire galaxy. Her connection to the Force wasn't as trained as Luke's had been, but after a lifetime of feeling its presence, she knew when something was fundamentally wrong. General? Lieutenant Connix approached cautiously. We're receiving strange reports from our scouts. Temporal anomalies. People seeing things that shouldn't be there. Before Leia could respond, the comm station erupted with activity. General Organa, unidentified ship entering atmosphere. It's Rey's signature, but she's flying Luke's X-Wing, and there's someone with her. Leia moved to the viewport. The battered X-Wing descended rapidly, its approach urgent rather than cautious. Rey was broadcasting clearance codes, but Leia could feel her anxiety even from this distance. Minutes later, Rey burst into the command center with a stranger in blue robes close behind. The room went silent. Every Resistance member instinctively reached for weapons, sensing that this man didn't belong. General, Rey said breathlessly, we have a serious problem. Leia studied the newcomer. He stood with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority, his eyes taking in everything. Escape routes, defensive positions, power dynamics. Those were the instincts of someone who'd fought battles that mattered. "I can feel that," Leia said quietly. "The Force is screaming. What happened?" Strange stepped forward, and despite a dozen weapons trained on him, he maintained his composure. "General Organa, my name is Dr. Stephen Strange. I'm from another universe entirely, and I've accidentally created a breach in something called the World Between Worlds. Time itself is fracturing across your galaxy, and if we don't seal it, your entire timeline will collapse." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Poe Dameron spoke up from where he'd been reviewing flight plans. "Did he just say another universe?" "Yes," Strange confirmed. "In my reality, I'm the Sorcerer Supreme, a guardian against mystical threats. I was tracking a dimensional anomaly when I breached the World Between Worlds without understanding what it was. The Force and my magic are incompatible at a fundamental level, and the collision created temporal fractures." "Prove it!" said a gruff voice. Finn pushed through the crowd, his expression skeptical. "Show us this magic!" Strange raised his hand, and golden circles formed in the air. Geometric patterns that violated conventional physics. The Tau Mandala solidified, glowing with power that made every force sensitive in the room recoil. It wasn't dark or light, it was other. Then the spell collapsed, and Strange staggered slightly. Rey caught his arm. "The Force fights him," Rey explained. "Every spell drains him twice as fast because his power draws from dimensional energy, not the Force itself. But he's telling the truth. I've seen the fractures. Luke's texts warned about this exact scenario. Someone from beyond breaching the World Between Worlds." Leia felt the weight of command settle heavier on her shoulders. They were already fighting an impossible war against the First Order. Now they had to deal with temporal paradoxes and dimensional magic. "Can you fix it?" she asked Strange directly. "I believe so," Strange replied. "But I need time to study your Force, to understand how to seal the breach without causing further damage. And I need access to any knowledge you have about the World Between Worlds. Texts, holocrons, anything that explains its nature." "We don't have that luxury," Leia said grimly. "If we felt the disturbance, so did Kylo Ren. And if my son realizes he can use this breach to access the past—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Rey spoke quietly. "He'll try to save Anakin. He'll try to prevent Darth Vader from ever falling." "Which would create a paradox," Strange said immediately. "If Vader never falls, the Empire potentially never rises. The rebellion never forms. Everyone in this room might cease to exist. Or we'd just remember a different history," offered Rose Tico from her workstation. "Right? If the past changes, maybe we change with it?" "Maybe," Strange conceded. "Or maybe your entire timeline fractures into infinite branches, all contradicting each other, until reality itself loses coherence and collapses. I've seen it happen. It's called an incursion, and it's one of the worst things that can occur in any universe." The room absorbed this in silence. Finally, Leia made her decision. "Then we have two objectives. First, we find a way to seal this breach before my son can exploit it. Second, we keep him away from you and away from any access points to the World Between Worlds." She turned to her officers. "Connix, I want all our scouts looking for temporal anomalies and reporting immediately. Finn, Poe, prepare a strike team. If the First Order moves toward any Force nexus, we intercept." "General," Poe interjected. "With respect, we're already stretched thin. The First Order has 10 times our resources. If Kylo Ren is personally involved, then we adapt," Leia said firmly. "We always do." She looked at Strange. "Doctor, you said you need to learn about the Force. Rey will work with you, but understand this. We're trusting you with knowledge that's destroyed people before. The temptation to misuse it is overwhelming." Strange met her gaze steadily. "General, in my universe, I held the Time Stone, an artifact that could control time itself. I used it once, in a time loop that lasted thousands of iterations, to save my reality. I understand the burden of that kind of power, and I understand the responsibility that comes with it. Leia saw something in his eyes. Old pain. The weight of impossible choices. This was a man who'd sacrificed before, who'd paid costs most people couldn't imagine. "All right," she said. "Rey, take him to the archives. Finn, go with them. I want security on Strange at all times. Not because I don't trust him," she added, seeing Strange's expression. "But because if Kylo captures you, he gains access to abilities we can't predict or counter." "Understood," Finn said, checking his blaster. As they moved toward the exit, a technician called out, "General! First Order fleet just went to hyperspace. Multiple Star Destroyers. They're heading toward—" He checked his readouts, then paled. "Toward the Mortis coordinates." Dead silence. "What's Mortis?" Strange asked. Rey's voice was barely a whisper. "The Force's birthplace, where the Ones, embodiments of the light and dark side, once lived. It's the strongest Force nexus in the galaxy." "And if the fractures are affecting it," Leia said, her face grim, "then Kylo isn't just looking for you, Dr. Strange. He's looking for a doorway to rewrite everything." The Knights of Ren moved like shadows through the remains of Mortis. The realm, if it could be called that, existed in a pocket of space that defied conventional physics. It had been abandoned centuries ago when the Ones died, but their power still resonated here. The monolithic structures rose from barren ground, ancient and eternal, marked with symbols that predated the Jedi Order itself. Kylo Ren stood before the central temple, his presence in the Force like a wound. Behind him, his 6 enforcers waited in silence. Vikrul, with his scythe and death touch, Cardo and his heavy blaster cannon, Trudgen, dragging his vibro-cleaver, Kuruk with his sniper rifle, Ushar and his war club, Aplek, silent as always, his axe ready. They were the Knights of Ren, warriors who'd abandoned the light side without fully embracing the Sith philosophy. They followed Kylo because he promised them power without dogma, strength without restraint. "Supreme Leader," Vikrul rasped through his vocoder, "the temple is unsealed. Whatever fracture occurred has weakened the barriers." Kylo felt it too. The Force here was bleeding. He could sense moments overlapping, past, present, future, all trying to exist simultaneously. Through the cracks, he felt echoes of the Ones. The father, maintaining balance. The daughter, radiating light. The son, consumed by darkness. And he felt something else. A presence that didn't belong to any timeline. "He's here," Kylo said quietly. "The stranger, the one who broke the Force." "Should we capture him?" Trudgen asked, his voice eager for violence. "No." Kylo moved toward the temple entrance. "He's already gone, fled to the Resistance. But he left something behind. A resonance. A pathway." His scarred hand traced the ancient glyphs. "The world between worlds is close. I can feel it breathing." Inside the temple, the fractures were worse. Time stuttered and skipped. Kylo saw himself, multiple versions, walking the same corridors at different ages. He saw Anakin Skywalker, young and conflicted, standing where the daughter had died. He saw Luke Skywalker, older and broken, grieving over failures yet to come. The Knights followed cautiously. Even they, hardened by years of violence, felt the wrongness here. In the central chamber, they found it. A doorway of pure Force energy, flickering in and out of existence. Through it, Kylo could see the world between worlds, that impossible realm of infinite pathways, each one leading to a specific moment in galactic history. And in one of those pathways, he saw his grandfather, Anakin Skywalker, standing on Mustafar, burning, dying, becoming the thing in the mask. Kylo's breath caught. There, He reached toward the doorway, but the force recoiled violently. The fracture wasn't stable enough. If he tried to enter now, he'd be torn apart by temporal paradox. Supreme Leader, Aplek signed in battle cant. Dangerous, unstable. I know, Kylo hissed, but the temptation was overwhelming. Everything he'd done, killing Han Solo, rejecting Luke's training, embracing the darkness, had been to honor Vader's legacy, to finish what his grandfather started. But what if he could do better? What if he could save Anakin before the fall? Prevent the tragedy that created Vader in the first place? The Supreme Leader could become something more. He could become the architect of a new timeline, where the Skywalker legacy wasn't defined by failure and redemption, but by triumph from the beginning. We need the Stranger, Kylo decided. Doctor Strange. He opened this door. He understands how it works. We take him alive, force him to stabilize the breach, and then... A disturbance in the Force. Kylo spun, lightsaber igniting. The unstable red blade snarled to life. 3 Resistance fighters emerged from a side corridor. Finn, holding a blaster, and 2 others Kylo didn't recognize. They must have followed the First Order fleet. Kylo! Finn called out. Step away from the doorway. Whatever you're planning, it's not worth destroying the galaxy. You don't understand, Kylo said, his voice cold. None of you do. This is the opportunity the Jedi feared. The chance to actually fix the past instead of just accepting failure. The past is fixed because it already happened, Finn shouted back. You can't change it without breaking everything. Can't I? Kylo gestured toward the flickering doorway. I can feel it, traitor. All those moments, Anakin's fall, Vader's choices, my parents' failures, they're right there. Accessible, changeable. The Knights of Ren fanned out, weapons ready. The Resistance fighters aimed their blasters, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Stand down, Finn said desperately. Please, Ben, that name means nothing. Kylo's rage flared, and the Force responded. The temple trembled. Ben Solo was weak, torn between light and dark, but Kylo Ren knows what must be done. He reached toward the doorway again, and this time he didn't stop when the Force resisted. He pushed, forcing his will against reality itself. The fracture widened, stabilized, and for a brief moment, Kylo Ren stood at the threshold of the world between worlds. He could see everything, every moment, every choice, and in one pathway, Anakin Skywalker looked directly at him across decades of time, as if somehow sensing his grandson's presence. Then blaster fire erupted. The Knights engaged the Resistance fighters, and in the chaos, Kylo made his decision. He couldn't enter yet, not without Strange to stabilize the breach permanently. But he could mark this place, claim it, make sure that when the time came, he'd be ready to reshape everything. Fall back, he commanded. We return to the fleet, but we leave a garrison here. No one enters this temple without my permission. And the Stranger? Vikrul asked. Kylo's expression behind his mask was cold and certain. We hunt him. The Resistance will protect him, which means we find their base and we take him by force. Once I have Dr. Strange, I'll return here. And I'll save my grandfather, no matter what it costs. The Knights retreated, leaving the Resistance fighters alive but trapped in the collapsing temple. As Kylo's shuttle lifted off from Mortis, he felt the Force fractures spreading further. Time was running out, but Kylo Ren had always thrived under pressure. In the depths of the Resistance archives, little more than a converted cargo hold filled with salvaged datacrons and damaged holocrons, Dr. Strange sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a semicircle of ancient Jedi texts. Rey knelt across from him, demonstrating a basic meditation technique. The Force isn't something you control, she explained. You open yourself to it. Let it flow through you. Jedi philosophy teaches that attachment and ego block the connection. Strange nodded, but his analytical mind was already dissecting the concept. In my universe, magic requires will and focus. You impose your desire on reality through precise mental discipline and dimensional manipulation. This is almost the opposite. Surrender instead of dominance. Exactly. Rey closed her eyes, demonstrating. Strange watched through his mystical third eye, the inherited gift that let him perceive magical energies, and saw something extraordinary. The Force moved through Rey like a river through a canyon, natural and powerful. It connected to everything around her, the air, the ground, the people in adjacent rooms. She wasn't generating the energy. She was channeling something that already existed. I see, Strange murmured. He closed his own eyes and attempted to replicate the technique. Immediately, his mystic arts training rebelled. His instinct was to reach out, to pull power from other dimensions. But every time he tried, the Force resisted. It wanted surrender, not conquest. Strange took a breath and tried something he rarely did. He stopped trying to control the outcome. He let go. The Force rushed in like a flood. Strange gasped, his eyes snapping open. For a fraction of a second, he'd felt it. The interconnection of everything, the living energy that bound the galaxy together. But then his analytical mind kicked in, trying to catalog and understand the sensation, and the connection shattered. That was progress, Rey said encouragingly. Most people take weeks to feel anything at all. I need faster than weeks, Strange replied grimly. He pulled one of the texts toward him, a treatise on force vergences and nexus points. According to this, the world between worlds can only be accessed from specific locations. Mortis was one. Where are the others? Rey hesitated. There's one on Lothal, the Jedi temple there. But it was sealed decades ago. And there's supposedly another on Exegol, but that's in the unknown regions. Sith territory. Exegol, Strange repeated, his photographic memory flagging the name. That's the second time I've heard that mentioned. What's there? We don't know for certain, Rey admitted. But Luke's texts mention it as a dark place, a Sith stronghold. He never found it, but he believed it contained secrets the Emperor wanted hidden. Strange's mind raced. If Kylo Ren can't stabilize the breach at Mortis without my help, he'll look for alternative access points. And if there's a doorway on Exegol, he'll go there, Rey finished. And if the Sith left anything behind, any knowledge about temporal manipulation, then he won't need me. Strange stood abruptly. We need to reach Exegol first. Finn, who'd been standing guard at the door, spoke up. That's First Order space, heavily defended, and we don't even have coordinates. It's hidden behind hyperspace distortions. Then we find someone who knows the way, Strange said. There must be records, maps, something. The lights in the archive flickered. All three of them felt it. Another temporal fracture, larger than before. Through the doorway, they heard shouting from the command center. They ran. The main viewport showed something impossible. In orbit above Ahch-To, a star destroyer was materializing. But wrong. It flickered between different states of existence. Intact, then battle-damaged, then destroyed, then intact again. The vessel was caught in a temporal loop, reliving its own destruction over and over. That's the Harbinger, breathed a resistance technician. It was destroyed at Jakku decades ago. But it's here. The fractures are accelerating, Strange said. Past events are manifesting in the present. If this continues, an alarm blared. First Order fleet incoming! Multiple star destroyers dropping out of hyperspace! Leia's voice cut through the panic. Battle stations! Get our fighters in the air! Someone find me a solution, or we're about to fight two battles simultaneously. One against Kylo Ren, and one against temporal ghosts. Strange turned to Rey. I need to do something I swore I'd never do again without absolute necessity. But we're out of time. What are you talking about? Rey asked. Strange's expression was grim. I'm going to try something incredibly dangerous. In my universe, I once used the time stone to create a time loop, trapping myself and an enemy in an infinite cycle until I could negotiate terms. I don't have the stone here, but if I can tap into the Force deeply enough, I might be able to create a localized temporal barrier. Slow down the fractures long enough for us to find a permanent solution. That sounds insane, Finn said flatly. It is, Strange agreed. And if it goes wrong, I could trap us all in a paradox or accelerate the collapse. But if we do nothing, Kylo Ren reaches Exegol, accesses the world between worlds from there, and rewrites galactic history. We're out of good options. Rey looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Do it. I'll help however I can. Strange moved to the viewport, placing his palms against the transparent steel. He closed his eyes and reached for the Force, not with his usual mystical techniques, but with the surrender Rey had taught him. This time, when the Force flooded in, he didn't fight it. He let it fill him, let it connect him to every living thing on the base, in the system, across the galaxy. He felt millions of lives, all connected by invisible threads. And he felt the fractures, tears in the fabric of causality, spreading like cracks in glass. Strange began to weave a spell unlike any he'd cast before. Mystic arts merged with Force energy, dimensional manipulation harmonizing with living connection. Golden circles formed around him, but instead of forcing them into existence, he let the Force guide their formation. The temporal barrier began to take shape, a bubble of stabilized time around Ahch-To, holding the fractures at bay. It wouldn't last long, hours at most, but it would give them a chance. Strange felt his reserves draining catastrophically. Blood trickled from his nose. His scarred hands trembled from the strain. Doctor! Rey grabbed his arm, lending her strength through the Force. With her help, Strange completed the barrier. The flickering Star Destroyer in orbit stabilized, frozen in a single moment. The temporal pressure eased. Strange collapsed, caught by Finn before he hit the ground. We have maybe 6 hours, Strange gasped. After that, the barrier fails and everything accelerates. We need those coordinates to Exegol, now. Leia's voice came over the comm. We might have something. C-3PO just reported that he's found an ancient Sith text in our archives, one that contains navigation data, but it's encrypted in a dead language that's forbidden to translate. Strange looked up at Rey, exhaustion and determination warring in his expression. Then we break that rule, because in 6 hours, if we haven't sealed the world between worlds permanently, your entire galaxy becomes a temporal paradox, and everyone you've ever known ceases to exist. The encrypted Sith text sat on the holo table in the command center, its forbidden script glowing crimson. C-3PO stood nearby, his photoreceptors dimmed in what could only be described as robotic anxiety. Oh dear, the protocol droid said for the 5th time. I'm afraid my programming strictly forbids translating this text. The Old Republic Senate passed legislation. 3PO, Leia interrupted gently but firmly. We need those coordinates. Can you translate it or not? I can, C-3PO admitted miserably. But doing so may require overriding core prohibitions installed by... Do it, Rey said. She placed a hand on the droid's golden shoulder. I'll take responsibility. Whatever happens, this is on me, not you. C-3PO's processors whirred uncertainly. Then he straightened. Very well, Mistress Rey. Beginning translation now. The Sith script began resolving into basic. Strange watched as coordinates materialized, a pathway through hyperspace, deliberately obscured, leading to a region marked only as the Hidden World. Exegol, Rey breathed. It's real. And according to this, C-3PO continued, his voice taking on an ominous quality as he read the ancient text. It is the throne of the Sith Eternal, a congregation of cultists who serve the Emperor. It says they've been waiting in the shadows for... He trailed off, his voice modulating with concern. "Oh my, this is most troubling." "What?" Leia demanded. "For the Emperor's return," C-3PO finished. Silence descended over the command center. "Palpatine is dead," Finn said firmly. "Vader killed him. We saw the Death Star explode." "Did we see his body?" Strange asked quietly. Every head turned toward him. "In my experience with ancient evil, death is often negotiable. If these Sith cultists believe their Emperor can return, and if they've been waiting on Exegol with that belief for decades," he looked at Rey, "what are the chances they've found a way?" Rey's face had gone pale. "The dark side offers power over death. It's one of its most seductive promises. If Palpatine learned those secrets, if he had contingencies, then he's been waiting for an opportunity," Strange finished. "And a galactic-scale temporal fracture would be exactly the kind of chaos someone like that would exploit." Leia's expression hardened with old pain. "He took everything from me. My planet, my family, my son." She looked at the coordinates. "If there's even a chance he's still out there, we need to know." "General," Poe interjected, "even if we wanted to go to Exegol, we don't have the forces. Kylo Ren's fleet is hunting for Strange. The temporal fractures are getting worse, and we're already operating with skeleton crews." "Then we don't take forces," Strange said. "We take a small team. Fast, quiet, surgical. Get in, assess the situation, find the World Between Worlds access point if it exists, and seal it before Kylo Ren arrives." "That's suicide," Finn stated flatly. "Exegol is Sith territory. If Palpatine is there, or anything else, we'd be walking into a trap. As opposed to waiting here while time itself collapses." Strange met Finn's eyes. "I've faced down cosmic entities and dimensional demons. I've died thousands of times in a time loop to save my reality. This is what I do. The question is, who's coming with me?" Rey stepped forward immediately. "If Palpatine is alive, if he's been manipulating events all along," her voice caught. "Kylo needs to know. Ben needs to know. His fall, his choices. If they were all engineered by someone he thought was dead, it could break his loyalty to the First Order," Leia said quietly, understanding, "or drive him deeper into darkness. Either way, we need to know the truth," Rey insisted. "I'll go," Finn added, checking his blaster. "Someone needs to watch your backs." Poe raised his hand. "And someone needs to fly you there. The Millennium Falcon can handle those hyperspace coordinates, and I'm the best pilot you've got." Leia looked at her team, so few, so young, carrying so much weight. Then she looked at Strange, this man from beyond reality who'd inadvertently put them all at risk, but was now offering to fix it. "Go," she decided. "Take the Falcon. Take whatever supplies you need. But understand, if you don't come back, if this fails, we have no backup plan. The temporal barrier Strange created will fail, and the galaxy will tear itself apart." "No pressure, then," Poe muttered. Strange moved to the holo table, studying the coordinates. His mystical senses reached out, trying to feel what lay at those coordinates across the vast distance. What he felt made his blood run cold. Darkness, ancient and patient, and something else. A presence that felt familiar, like the echoes he'd sensed in the World Between Worlds. "There's something else you should know," Strange said. "When I was in the World Between Worlds, I felt multiple presences trying to breach it. Kylo Ren is one. But there's another, older, more cunning. I think it's been waiting for this fracture, counting on it." "Palpatine," Rey whispered. "If he's been studying the World Between Worlds from Exegol, if he's been planning this—" Strange didn't finish. He didn't need to. The implications were clear. The temporal fracture might not have been an accident at all. Strange had breached the world between worlds, yes. But what if something on the other side had been waiting for someone to open that door? What if Palpatine had sensed Strange's approach and subtly guided him toward making that mistake? "We leave in 1 hour," Leia commanded. "Prep the Falcon. Load emergency supplies. And someone get me a direct line to our deep space scouts. I want to know the second Kylo Ren's fleet changes course." As the team dispersed to prepare, Strange remained at the holotable, staring at the coordinates to Exegol. His hands trembled slightly, the after effects of creating the temporal barrier still taxing his system. Rey approached quietly. "Are you strong enough for this? You nearly burned yourself out creating that barrier." "I'll have to be," Strange replied, "because if we fail, there won't be anyone left to try again." "You know," Rey said softly, "Luke used to say the Force works in mysterious ways, that nothing happens by accident. What if you were meant to breach the world between worlds? What if this was always supposed to happen?" Strange considered this. In his universe, he'd seen how the Time Stone had shown him millions of possible futures, but only one path to victory. Perhaps the Force operated similarly. Vast, incomprehensible plans that mere mortals couldn't see until they were already part of them. "If that's true," Strange said, "then let's hope the Force has a plan for what comes next. Because I'm operating without a script here." Rey smiled faintly. "Welcome to the Resistance. None of us have scripts. We just do what we think is right and hope the galaxy survives our choices." "Inspiring," Strange said dryly, but there was warmth in his voice. An hour later, the Millennium Falcon lifted off from Ajan-Kloss, carrying 4 people toward the unknown regions and the dark heart of Sith power. Behind them, Strange's temporal barrier shimmered in the Force, holding back the fractures, but it was already weakening. They had perhaps 5 hours left. In the First Order flagship, Kylo Ren stood before a holographic projection of the galaxy, watching red markers spread across known space, each one a temporal fracture, each one an opportunity. "Supreme Leader," General Hux reported, "our spies confirm that a small vessel, identified as the Millennium Falcon, has left the Resistance base. They're heading into the unknown regions." Kylo's scarred face showed no expression, but inside, triumph surged. "They're going to Exegol. Should we intercept?" "No." Kylo's fingers curled into fists. "Let them go. Let them discover what waits there. When they realize the Emperor still lives, when they understand the true scope of what's coming, they'll be too terrified to stop me from accessing the world between worlds." "And Dr. Strange?" "Is walking directly into a trap," Kylo said with cold satisfaction. "The Emperor has been waiting decades for someone like Strange, someone with the power to stabilize temporal pathways. Between the Stranger's magic and the Emperor's knowledge of Sith alchemy, they'll open the world between worlds permanently. And if they succeed in closing it instead?" Kylo turned to Hux, his eyes burning with dark purpose. "Then I'll kill them all myself and tear open the doorway with my bare hands. One way or another, I will reach my grandfather. I will save Anakin Skywalker, and I will rewrite the failures of the past into the triumphs of a new future." He turned back to the hologram, watching the Falcon's projected trajectory. "Set course for Exegol, but give them a head start. I want them to see what waits there. I want them to understand that they've already lost." The First Order fleet shifted into formation, Star Destroyers aligning like predators preparing for a kill. And across the galaxy, the temporal fractures spread wider. Exegol was wrong. That was Strange's first thought as the Millennium Falcon dropped out of hyperspace. The planet hung in space like a wound, perpetually stormed, shrouded in red lightning that never ceased. The atmosphere itself seemed hostile to life, and the Force here felt corrupted, twisted into something that made Strange's mystical senses recoil. This place? Rey whispered from the co-pilot seat, her face pale. I can feel it. So much death. So much darkness. Poe guided the Falcon through the atmospheric turbulence with expert precision, but even he looked unsettled. Sensors are going crazy. There's something massive down there, multiple structures. And he checked his readings again. Thousands of life signs. How is that possible? This place is supposed to be abandoned. The Sith Eternal, Strange said, remembering C-3PO's translation. The cult that served Palpatine. They've been here all along, waiting. The Falcon descended through crimson storms toward a vast citadel carved into black stone. As they approached, Strange saw them, rows upon rows of star destroyers, buried in the rock like sleeping giants. Dozens of them, hundreds. A hidden fleet, Finn breathed. He's been building a hidden fleet. Not building, Strange corrected, his enhanced perception picking up details. Those ships are decades old. He started this before he died. This was always his contingency plan. They landed in a massive hangar bay, empty, as if waiting for them. The moment they disembarked, Strange felt the Force pressing down like a physical weight. This place was saturated with dark side energy accumulated over years of Sith rituals. Stay close, Rey said, igniting her lightsaber. The yellow blade provided a small comfort in the oppressive darkness. And be ready for anything. They moved through corridors of black stone etched with Sith runes that made Strange's eyes hurt to read. The architecture was designed to unsettle, to instill dread. It was psychological warfare in architectural form. Eventually, they reached a massive throne room, and sitting in the center, surrounded by life support machinery and crackling with dark side energy. No, Rey whispered. It can't be. Emperor Palpatine was alive, or something that had once been Palpatine. His body was decayed, sustained by Sith alchemy and machinery, fingers withered to claws. But his eyes, those yellow, malevolent eyes, burned with the same cunning intelligence that had orchestrated the fall of the Republic. At last, Palpatine rasped, his voice echoing with unnatural power. The Jedi girl returns, and she brings such interesting companions. Those eyes fixed on Strange. The man from beyond. The one who opened the door I could never reach. Strange stepped forward, his hands already weaving defensive wards. You knew I was coming. I called you here, Palpatine corrected, a terrible smile crossing his ruined face. For years I have probed the world between worlds, seeking to access its power, but the Force itself rejected me. The doorway could only be opened from outside, by someone who didn't belong to this reality. He leaned forward. And then I felt you, Dr. Strange, stumbling through dimensions like a blind man, searching for threats. It was simple to pull your attention toward the world between worlds, to make you believe you'd found it by accident. The words hit Strange like a physical blow. You manipulated me. I guided you, Palpatine said. And now, thanks to your dimensional magic, the world between worlds is accessible. Time itself can be rewritten. The past can be changed. And I will rise again, not as this broken thing, but in a body restored, with the full power of the dark side behind me. Rey raised her lightsaber. We'll stop you. Will you? Palpatine gestured, and from the shadows, figures emerged. Sith cultists, dozens of them, chanting in an ancient language. And behind them, floating in preserved tanks, clone bodies, dozens of them, all empty, waiting for a consciousness to inhabit them. I have died before, Palpatine said, and I will die again, but each time I return. The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. And now, with the world between worlds open, I can do more than simply transfer my essence to a new body. I can reach back through time and prevent my death from ever occurring. Strange's mind raced. That would create a paradox. If you never died at the second Death Star, then Vader never redeemed himself, Luke never became a true Jedi, the Empire never fell, and the galaxy remains mine. Palpatine finished. Order, power, eternal rule. No more pretending to be a benevolent chancellor. No more hiding in shadows. Just the Sith, supreme and eternal. You're insane, Finn said. You'd destroy everything. I would own everything, Palpatine corrected. And you, Dr. Strange, will help me. You will stabilize the temporal pathways. You will open the world between worlds wide enough for me to step through. And if you refuse... He gestured, and the cultist moved forward menacingly. I will tear the knowledge from your mind and use your corpse as a ritual focus. Strange looked at Rey, at Finn, at Poe. They were surrounded, outnumbered, in the heart of enemy territory. The temporal barrier he'd created around Ajon Kloss was failing, and Kylo Ren would arrive any moment, adding another variable to an already impossible situation. But Strange had faced impossible situations before. There's a third option, Strange said calmly. Oh? Palpatine's tone was amused. Do tell. Strange's hands moved in complex patterns. The option where I seal the world between worlds from the inside, where I use every ounce of mystical power I have left to collapse the doorway permanently. You won't access it. Kylo Ren won't access it. No one will. The past will remain fixed. The timeline will stabilize, and your plan dies here. Palpatine's amusement vanished. You would trap yourself in the process. Cut yourself off from your own reality forever. Yes, Strange said simply. I would. Rey grabbed his arm. Strange, no. There has to be another way. There isn't, Strange said, meeting her eyes. This is the one path to victory. I've known it since we arrived. The Force showed me. He smiled faintly. Your Force has a sense of irony. It brought someone from outside to fix a problem from within, and the price is that I stay here forever. How noble, Palpatine sneered, but futile. You don't have the power left to... Strange's eyes blazed with golden light. I have exactly enough. He'd been preparing the spell since they entered the throne room, hiding it beneath layers of misdirection. Now, he released it. The crimson bands of Cyttorak erupted from Strange's hands, not targeting Palpatine, but targeting the space around them. The mystical restraints created a barrier, buying them seconds. Rey! Strange shouted. The world between worlds! Where's the access point? Rey closed her eyes, reaching out through the Force. Below us! Deeper in the Citadel! There's a chamber! Go! Strange commanded. I'll hold them here! We're not leaving you! Finn protested. You don't have a choice. Strange's voice rang with authority. If I don't seal that doorway, Palpatine wins. The timeline collapses. Everything you fought for, everyone you love, ceases to exist. Now go! Poe grabbed Finn's arm. Rey hesitated one moment longer, tears in her eyes. May the Force be with you, she whispered. And with you, Strange replied. They ran. The crimson bands shattered under Palpatine's assault, and the cultists surged forward. But Strange was ready. He would hold this position. He would buy them time, and he would make sure that when he sealed the world between worlds, he took Palpatine's ambitions with him. Rey, Finn, and Poe descended into the depths of the Sith Citadel, fighting through cultists and navigating corridors that seemed to shift and change as temporal energy warped reality around them. Above, they could hear the sounds of battle, Strange's mystical shields holding against impossible odds. Here! Rey stopped before a massive door marked with symbols that hurt to look at. The world between worlds is beyond this point. I can feel it. Finn placed charges on the door. We've got maybe 2 minutes before those cultists catch up. Whatever we're doing, we do it fast. The door exploded inward, revealing a chamber that defied architecture. The walls didn't exist in 3 dimensions. They curved and folded through space that shouldn't have been possible to perceive. And in the center, floating like a tear in reality itself, the doorway to the world between worlds. It was larger than before, more stable. Through it, Rey could see infinite pathways, each one leading to a moment in galactic history. She saw herself as a child on Jakku. She saw Luke training on Dagobah. She saw Anakin and Padme on Naboo. She saw the Clone Wars, the fall of the Jedi, the rise of the Empire. Every moment, all at once. How do we seal it? Poe asked, staring at the impossible sight. I don't know, Rey admitted. Strange said he'd... A lightsaber ignited behind them. They spun to find Kylo Ren standing in the doorway, his Knights of Ren flanking him. His scarred face was illuminated by his unstable red blade. You led me right to it, Kylo said. Thank you for that. Ben, Rey pleaded, don't do this. Palpatine is alive. He's been manipulating everything, including you. I know, Kylo said calmly. I felt him the moment I arrived. The Emperor thought he could control me, use me as he did my grandfather. But he's wrong. His eyes fixed on the world between worlds doorway. I'm going to save Anakin, and then together we'll return to the present and end Palpatine once and for all. It doesn't work that way, Rey shouted. If you change the past, you don't just get a better version, you destroy everything that came after. Your mother, Luke, Han, you. None of us would exist. Perhaps that's better, Kylo said quietly. Perhaps a galaxy where the Sith never rose and the Jedi never fell is worth the price. He stepped toward the doorway. Rey moved to intercept, lightsaber raised. I won't let you. Then you'll die, Kylo said, and attacked. Their blades met in a shower of sparks. The Force swirled around them. Rey's desperation against Kylo's determination. They'd fought before, but this time the stakes were reality itself. Finn and Poe opened fire on the Knights of Ren, trying to keep them back. But they were outmatched, and everyone in the chamber knew it. Kylo pressed his advantage, driving Rey back toward the doorway. I don't want to kill you, Rey, but I will if you stand in my way. The past can be fixed. Join me. We can save them all. Anakin, Padme, everyone who suffered because of Palpatine's manipulations. That's not how the Force works, Rey countered, her blade moving in desperate defense. The past is fixed because it already happened. You can't change it without breaking everything. The Force has been wrong before, Kylo snarled. Their duel carried them dangerously close to the world between worlds doorway. Rey could feel its pull, the temptation to step through and see all those moments she'd only dreamed of. Her parents, her origins, the truth of who she really was. Then she felt something else, a presence in the Force, familiar and warm. Luke's voice echoed through the chamber, though his body was long gone. Rey, the Force has shown you what must be done. Trust in it. And remember, sacrifice is the truest expression of the light. Rey understood. Finn! Poe! She shouted. Get back to the ship! Warn the Resistance! What are you... Finn started. Go! Rey commanded, using the Force to push them back toward the exit. Then she lowered her lightsaber. Kylo stopped, confused. What are you doing? What Strange was willing to do, Rey said quietly. What the Force has been guiding me toward since this began. She stepped backward, into the world between worlds. The effect was immediate. Rey felt herself existing in all moments simultaneously, her consciousness stretching across time itself. She was on Jakku, on Ahch-To, on Exegol, everywhere and everywhen at once. And she understood what Strange had realized. The world between worlds couldn't be sealed from outside. Someone had to close it from within. No! Kylo lunged forward, but Rey was already too far inside. The doorway was collapsing around her as she poured all her force energy into sealing it permanently. She saw Strange in the throne room above, doing the same thing with his mystical power. Their energies combined, force and mystic arts, working together for the first time in history. The world between worlds shuddered. The infinite pathways began to close, one by one. Past moments became fixed again. The timeline stabilized. "Rey!" Kylo screamed, reaching for her. For a moment, just a moment, Rey saw him as he could have been. Ben Solo, Jedi Knight, standing beside his mother and uncle, unburdened by darkness. She saw the galaxy as it might have been if different choices had been made. But those were possibilities, not certainties. And the price of those possibilities was the destruction of what already existed. Rey smiled at Kylo, at Ben, one last time. "May the Force be with you," she said. Then the world between worlds collapsed. Kylo Ren stood alone in the chamber, staring at empty space where the doorway had been. His grandfather was gone. The past was sealed. And Rey. "No!" His anguished scream echoed through the citadel. The Knights of Ren stood in silence, uncertain. They'd never seen their supreme leader break like this. Finn and Poe had barely made it to the Falcon when the entire citadel began to collapse. Strange's spell and Rey's sacrifice had created a force shockwave that was tearing through Exegol's foundations. "We have to go back!" Finn shouted. "Rey's still—" "She's gone," Poe said, his voice heavy. "She knew what she was doing. And if we don't leave now, we're all dead." The Falcon lifted off as the citadel crumbled. Behind them, they saw Kylo Ren's shuttle fleeing as well, pursued by explosions as Palpatine's contingency failed catastrophically. In the throne room, the Emperor screamed in rage as his clone bodies shattered and his life support systems failed. Without the world between worlds, he had no path back to power, no way to cheat death again. "This isn't over!" Palpatine shrieked. "I will return! I always return!" But the words were empty. The throne room collapsed, burying him in darkness. And across the galaxy, the temporal fractures stopped spreading. Time stabilized. The past became fixed once more. On Ajon Kloss, Leia Organa felt two presences vanish from the Force. Rey and Strange. Gone, but not truly dead. Transformed into something else on the guardians between worlds, holding the barrier closed from within. Tears streamed down her face. She'd lost so much. But the galaxy was saved. For now. In the months that followed, the galaxy slowly recovered from the temporal crisis. The fractures faded. The visions of past and future ceased. Reality became solid once more. The Resistance mourned Rey as a hero. Dr. Strange was remembered as the stranger from beyond who'd sacrificed everything to fix his mistake. Statues were proposed, though none were built. Both would have hated the attention. Kylo Ren returned to the First Order changed. The Knights of Ren reported that he'd become more focused, more dangerous, but also more conflicted. He'd been shown a path to redemption and watched it seal shut before his eyes. What that would do to him, only time would tell. Finn took Rey's lightsaber and vowed to continue her legacy. Poe became more serious about his role in the Resistance, understanding now just how much individuals could sacrifice for the greater good. And Leia, in her final years, would sometimes stand alone at night and reach out through the Force. And sometimes, just sometimes, she felt two presences reaching back, a young woman and a sorcerer, standing guard at the barrier between worlds, making sure the past stayed fixed and the future remained possible. The Force, she realized, had brought Strange to their galaxy not by accident, but by design. It had needed someone from outside to understand what needed to be done. And in the end, both Strange and Rey had understood the same truth. That sacrifice was the greatest act of power anyone could perform. So, the world between worlds remained sealed. Time flowed naturally once more, and two guardians stood eternal watch, making sure it stayed that way. May the Force be with you. More stories await. Subscribe.